going forward, as we have learned there are not in our trading relationship with this administration. And that's why the Team Canada approach is to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's why we're always clear that we will impose retaliatory tariffs if tariffs are levied against our exports. But this is really a day when common sense has prevailed, and that's good news.
Who saw this coming? Donald Trump backing down. Was it all just a high-stakes game of tariff chicken, aluminum chicken? I'm just winging it there. Just hours before Canada was set to announce a dollar-for-dollar counter-tariff retaliations for the U.S. imposition of 10% tariffs on Canadian aluminum, they claimed it was a national security risk. The U.S. suddenly dropped the tariffs. But for how long, and why did they do it, and what's the political fallout? The International Trade Minister, Mary Ng, who led the negotiations, told me earlier on this program that there was no backroom deal. So what made the Americans blink? To talk about that, the press gallery joins us right now. Emily Nicolas is a reporter with Le Devoir. Our special guest today is Bruce Heyman, the former U.S. ambassador to Canada. And Bob Fife from the Globe and Mail will join us in a minute. Great to have both of you here. Bruce, Ambassador Heyman, I'll just start with you. Why do you believe, because this was unusual, Donald Trump campaigning, we've seen these tariffs before. Why did the U.S. back down so suddenly?
Politically, a failure. It was happening, and they were seeing it not only in the regions. What was happening was the aluminum industry and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and a group of governors all were coming at the White House saying, this is a loser for us. And one part of the losing proposition is that we actually have a shortage now of these aluminum cans because people aren't going to the pubs with the taps. They're all buying their beer in cans at home. And so there's a huge shortage of aluminum cans to begin with. So prices start going up on aluminum cans. The price of beer is going up. And of course, there's a whole group of people saying, yep, that's Donald Trump's fault. Where reality is there's just a shortage there. But bottom line is this was a failure from the beginning. The administration really wanted to put on this administration quotas and tariffs on steel and aluminum from the very beginning. You saw it back in the negotiations under NAFTA. And so there was a little window of time here where during the pandemic, you know, regular aluminum versus specialized aluminum, which is used in manufacturing, was exceeding because the specialized aluminum wasn't used during the pandemic. And so as a result of that, those numbers were up. So they used that window to try to squeeze you, Canada, into a quota system. And number two, tried to use it for political bonus points, saying, this president is going to fight for good trade when the Canadians are taking advantage of us. At the end of the day, it was a losing political dynamic. And then today, of all days, this was their day. They were unveiling this great Mideast peace proposal that was laid out on the table, the signing ceremony. The last thing they needed today was news of a trade war with Canada. And so there were a lot of things going on simultaneously, but at the end of the day, it was losing proposition politically for this administration.
Yeah, Emily, what baffles me is, logic has never been ascribed to some of the trade decisions by Donald Trump before, specifically around tariffs, but it does appear that the threat of retaliation made a difference. What do you make of this?
Aluminium in the United States, there's not enough of it for industry to only, even if there's tariff, the goal of it is always to encourage people to buy locally. There's not enough of it for factories to only rely on it. So it would have been basically American consumers who would have paid for Canadian imported aluminium with a tariff on it. So I agree it was a losing proposition from the get-go. Always the tricky thing with the Trump administration is always to not lose face. It seems to be very much a strong motivation for this president. So if they're able to back off in a way that we're going to talk about it in Canada, but it's not going to make the news in the U.S. that much, then he can actually change his mind in a way that he doesn't lose face, and that's very much It seems to be the key factor there. And on the other hand, on the Canadian side, there were people being worried that if Canada retaliated, we would end up with making Trump angry at us in a way that he could also react to that irrationally. But there is it seems that the negotiation unfolded in a way that also no ego were bruised, or not that much. So that's also makes us safer in a way.
Yeah, I'm intrigued, Bruce Heyman. There were fears that Donald Trump hates to be embarrassed, and he's not above, personal vendettas, as we've seen that before. That this didn't escalate, and he backed down. I wonder if Canadians don't appreciate that there's a campaign going on, and maybe Chrystia Freeland and Minister Ng had targeted tariffs on specific American goods that were going to hurt the Republican players in the November campaign. Was that a factor?
Oh, it's absolutely a factor. When I was ambassador, everybody pulled me aside in the U.S. government and said, there are no better trade negotiators across the table from the U.S. than the Canadians. Because we had remember those frustrations on TPP, and then there was country of origin labeling on beef, and then the targeted responses on that. Canadians are very sophisticated in the way you negotiate your trade. And had the Trump administration at all listened, they would have realized that how they're playing is a failed and losing game, that it's about sitting down across the table and finding paths for win-win solutions. And what they were trying to do was force Canada into a losing situation. And that never works. By the way, I would never do that to Canada because of our relationship, but I also wouldn't do it because of the sophistication in the response. And that response would have targeted deeply sensitive swing state voters, and I think it would have been a lose-lose for him.
Emily, it's interesting. So for the industry in Canada, it's a big deal. But, Justin Trudeau, you had Aaron O'Toole saying Justin Trudeau's negotiated bad trade deals. He just told me last week on this program he would do better trade deals and he would solve the aluminum issue. Is this a big win for the Liberals?
I did not listen to that quote, but it sounds, the way you summarize it, it sounds like something Donald Trump would say with the art of the deal. But it's always easier to say, of course, in the opposition. And we don't know. That's the thing as well, that when we talk about how deals are being negotiated, is that a lot of it is actually not accessible information to the public because, the nature of negotiation is that we don't know exactly everything that's said behind closed doors. And so it's hard actually to make a claim like that and be able to, be certain that things would go better, especially when you don't actually have the information of how things went down.
Yeah, let me bring in Bob Fife from the Globe and Mail. Bob, good to have you here. Real quick, what's your read on the political fallout of this domestically? It's really hard for me to believe, and I know Mary Ng just told me that there was no backroom deal on this. This was just common sense. What's your take on this, Bob Fife?
The fact that they were going to be facing $3.6 billion in tariffs on U.S. products. I think the Americans backed out at the last moment because this was going to be an escalation that they did not want. And besides, they did end up getting a monetary mechanism in place for raw aluminum. So in some way, they got a minor victory out of this.
Bob, I was interesting. I did ask Mary Ng if this retaliation works so well against the U.S., would they do the same strategy against China? What do you make of this and maybe the political fallout domestically here?
Well, I'm not sure that they would go that way with China. We don't do that much trade ourselves with China. We don't export that much to them. We get much more stuff from China. But this government doesn't seem to be willing to get into a trade war with China because it would have too much of an impact on the Canadian economy. And in terms of the whole raw aluminum thing, I think this is going to play well for the government across the country because it looks like Ms. Freeland stood up to battle Donald Trump and they backed down. So this is a win-win from the government perspective.
Bruce Heyman, just before I let you go, I mean, look, in the U.S., it's all about the campaign now. It's all domestic politics. There are 600,000 Americans living in Canada. I know you're involved in an effort to get them to vote. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats. Could those Canadians make a difference in the outcome of or those Americans living in Canada, rather, make a difference in the outcome of the U.S. election?
Absolutely. If you look at many of our elections in the past, they've been very close. You know, the state of Michigan was won by Donald Trump by less than 11,000 votes. Are there more than 11,000 Americans that would call Michigan their home state, living in Windsor or living throughout Canada? Absolutely. So I think that there is a chance that Americans living in Canada, if they get out and vote, go to votefromabroad.org. If you go register and get your vote out, that you actually may be selecting the next president of the United States, given the number of swing states that you're related to: Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, et cetera.
And how do they, and by the way, does this whole controversy about mail-in ballots, Ambassador Heyman, does that complicate the issue?
It does a bit. So 30 states, you can vote from abroad with email or fax. 20 states require hard ballot delivery. So if you go register right now tonight, you'll get your ballot within the next week. And so you can't sit on it. You need to actually vote and turn it around and get it back. And if you're really concerned, use one of those courier services that are overnight or 3-day delivery and get it back quickly. But yeah, the mail service is an issue, and there's a lot of litigation and challenges in the United States about the U.S. Postal Service, and we're deeply worried about that. But we have a lot of time now if you act quickly.